There was a fascinating moment on propaganda network Fox News over the weekend. If you've watched this program before, and if you haven't and you're on our YouTube channel for the first time, please make sure you are subscribing to the channel. We're trying to get to 1 million subscribers. But if you've watched before, you know that sometimes Shepard Smith or Chris Wallace will make at least like a little sense on Fox News, and they'll cut short or short circuit some obvious lie here or there. And it's a good thing when they do it. And I have an example for you today. But this is more than just sort of conflict porn, which is what a lot of corporate media likes to do. Here's what I want you to understand about what I'm going to play for you today. The Trump administration and the people around Trump are telling lies all the time about just basic knowable facts. These are not lies hidden in political rhetoric or selective statistics. These are just straight up demonstrable lies. And in the clip I'm going to play for you today, Donald Trump's chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, went on Fox News Sunday. He was interviewed by Fox's Chris Wallace, and Mulvaney tried to assert, he claimed that Mueller's testimony effectively is an exoneration of Donald Trump. Remember, they've been claiming that Mueller's report is an exoneration of Donald Trump, which it's not. And now they are claiming that Robert Mueller's testimony is an exoneration of Donald Trump, which it's not. And they get into a back and forth about, oh, Mueller said there was no way Trump was getting indicted no matter what for what he did. This is an exoneration de facto. And in a lot of places, Donald Trump's cronies, the people around him, the brown-nosing sycophants, as I like to call them, they've been getting away with this stuff. And even on Fox News, they usually get away with these types of lies. It goes unchallenged, and then it becomes part of the de facto status quo narrative. This is how propaganda works. Fox News doesn't have to perpetuate the propaganda themselves, even though they do in many cases. They can simply stand aside while the Trump administration creates it. This is why I believe in responsible platforming. This is why when I interview an extremist, like whoever, as many times I've done before, I don't have to agree with what they say. I can make the problem worse merely by standing aside and letting them say their thing, which is why I don't do that when I do interviews with radicals and extremists. That's why this is so important. This is a small victory that Chris Wallace short circuits this. Let's take a look at the video.
Mueller answered the single one outstanding question. He said, they asked him, would you have indicted the president if he were not the president? And Mueller said, absolutely not. He would not do that. He answered incorrectly.
No, that's not what he said.
He did.
No, that isn't what he said. He said we didn't, because of the OLC, the Office of Legal Counsel Guidelines, he said we didn't even make a decision on that.
He got asked the question by Congressman Lieu, who I know, said, would you have indicted him if he were not the president? And he said, yes, we would have. And he went back to the beginning of the second hearing in the afternoon.
And that's when he said we didn't. He said yes, he did. I agree. But what he said was that I wouldn't have made it. We didn't even make that decision because the guidelines prevented us from doing that.
I actually just think you're wrong on that. If they could,
the record will show what it shows.
If they had,
I promise you're wrong.
If they had.
So Mulvaney wants to parrot this idea that Mueller vindicated Donald Trump, even though the opposite was actually said at the hearing. So let's look at the transcript. Jerry Nadler during the hearing said, so the report did not conclude that he did not commit obstruction of justice. Is that correct? Mueller says that is correct. And Nadler adds, and what about total exoneration? Did you actually totally exonerate the president? Relevant because that's what Trump has been claiming. Mueller says no. Nadler adds, now, in fact, your report expressly states that it does not exonerate the president, and Mueller confirms it does, to which Nadler adds, and your investigation actually found, quote, multiple acts by the president that were capable of exerting undue influence over law enforcement investigations, including the Russian interference and obstruction investigations. Is that correct? To which Mueller says, correct. This is why we have to interrupt the echo chamber at any point where we have an opportunity to do that, because this is how propaganda spreads. When we talk about Donald Trump and the way in which he uses Twitter, a lot of his Twitter use, a more interesting analysis of his Twitter use, I will say, is not about the content of each tweet per se, but about the way in which Donald Trump will use Twitter to start tweeting the exact same stuff that his chief of staff will go on Fox News and say, and that then some right-wing activist commentator will do a blog post about, and Donald Trump Jr. will retweet. This is how they foment that echo chamber. The way that the propaganda machine works is obfuscate and mischaracterize as much as you can. I call that lying. You could use those softer terms, obfuscate and mischaracterize if you want, in order to make the truth very difficult to even find because you're wading through all sorts of conflicting statements. Then, once you've inserted your narrative into the broader discussion, which is there's nothing to see here, you start to misdirect and distract with things like Baltimore is infested, as an example. And then in other cases, you simply say nothing altogether. You go totally silent as if the issue doesn't exist, which is actually a really effective way to short circuit the media narrative, because if media can't get people to react to something, it becomes very difficult to continue that story on and on and on. That's the broader way in which the propaganda model works. And Chris Wallace, I mean, listen, I'm not going to go around telling you Chris Wallace is the best person around, but to the extent that he at least short-circuited this one minor element of Donald Trump's cronies trying to spread propaganda, lies, I think better said, we should commend him for it. Make sure that you are following The David Pakman Show on Instagram at David Pakman Show. And while you're there, follow me as well at david.pakman. I've got a tomato plant. I've been monitoring and watering and pruning for 3 months. And I finally got some tomatoes. There's a picture on my Instagram. Go check it out, david.pakman. Right back after this. If you love learning new things, you probably want to check this out. The David Pakman Show today is sponsored by Skillshare, and we're giving you 2 entire months of free access to Skillshare when you click the link underneath this video. Skillshare is a vibrant online learning community offering more than 25,000 video classes on just about anything you can think of. Get better at playing an instrument. Learn to use Photoshop. How to edit videos. They have classes on drawing, painting, business, cooking, nutrition, personal productivity, and I'm not even really scratching the surface. I recently took a great class on introductory watercolor painting. I'm still not good, but I am learning, and you can access the entire library of fun, easy-to-use online courses for free for 2 months by using the link underneath this video. 2 months of learning something that's totally new to you, something you want to get better at, something you already love, or you can get ahead in your career by learning new skills that will help you at your job. I've gotten a ton out of it. Pat has taken some courses that he's found really valuable, and I think you'll love it too. Get started for free by clicking the link under this video.